everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Sharon and this is a channel that is dedicated to all things related to narcissism. I make videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, despite today being Thursday, on all types of topics related to narcissism. So if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. I would really appreciate it if you give the video a thumbs up. It's a free way you can help me out. And definitely don't forget to leave a comment because I like to read what you have to say. So I'm going to tell you something that happened on Tuesday morning, something absolutely horrific that happened. I'm going to try to say this without getting too emotional. It's going to be a little bit difficult, but I really want to try and do it. In fact, as I'm making this video, Joe is still so traumatized by what happened that I'm going to tell him not to even listen to this video. So Tuesday morning, I got up to bring Joe's son to school. I go out into the garage and the garage door was left open. Immediately upon that, and it was 13 degrees outside, I knew that I was in a lot of trouble. For those of you that don't know, I run a small snake breeding business out of my home. And I know, I get it, I do. A lot of people don't like snakes. I know. There was a time I didn't like snakes as well. I can remember my son was little. He must have been 2 or 3 years old. And I was outside in the yard playing with him. And all of a sudden, I saw a snake sunning itself on a rock. And I freaked out. I scared my son. I just started running and screaming. There was no thought process to it. I just ran and screamed. Later, a couple of years later, my son got into reptiles and snakes and that type of thing. And, I'm a homeschool mom, so I took that opportunity and we started learning about them together. And we went to some reptile shows and I kind of got into it, oddly enough. So I actually really like snakes and reptiles now. And then I started a business and it was breeding snakes. And for those of you that are wondering, yes, it's a real business. Yes, people really buy them. And yes, I really make money doing it. And I love it. And it's good for my family. It's fun. It's a family business that we run. When you breed snakes, the way that you breed them is you have to mimic what they do. For best results, you want to mimic what they do in the wild. So in the wild, is if you live in a colder climate, snakes brumate. So brumation is not the same as hibernation. During brumation, the snake is awake. The reptile is awake. It doesn't eat though, but it does drink, and you keep it in a cool, dark place. So in the wild, a snake would go into a den, so it would go in like a little cave underground in the dark, and it stays there until it's warmer. If it happens to be a nice day, it could come out. So what I do for my snakes is around Thanksgiving, generally, I did it a little bit later this year because I was moving, but generally, at the beginning of November, I stop feeding them. And then around Thanksgiving, I brumate them. So what I've done in the past is I put them in my basement. So I put them in these boxes. I know this sounds cruel. It's not. It's what you do. So I put them in these boxes in my basement and in the dark, and I monitor the temperature. Now, my basement back in New Hampshire, it was a perfect temperature. It would get 55 degrees, and it would just stay there. So they would stay there until the beginning of March. And then I would bring them out, gradually warm them back up. And after a couple of weeks, I would feed them and then breed them. So I've been doing this for several years. Well, this year it was a little bit different because, as you know, a lot of you, I was moving. So my snakes were ready to brumate. They stopped eating on their own. So I just had them at my house. I kept them. I actually unplugged their heat about 2 weeks before I moved. And Joe found a place in his garage that he had monitored beforehand, and the temperature was good for the snakes. So I had these snakes in his garage, and they were doing great. They've been there for 2 weeks. They were doing really, really well. Well, on Tuesday, when I went to bring Joe's son to school, somebody had left the garage door open. And I knew right away that this was going to be a problem. So I took the snakes. I opened up all their containers and their temperature. We'll have their little temperature monitor. It said 30 degrees. It was 13 degrees outside. So I brought all the snakes inside, and I was terrified. I was afraid to open the boxes. So I opened one by one, and every single snake looked dead, just dead. I took out the first one I took out was Dakar, who happened to be my favorite. He was cold. Snakes are cold-blooded, so they don't have a warm body temperature at all. Their body temperature will be what it is on the outside. some of the waters, not every tank, but some of the tanks had frozen water in there. So I took the car out and he was just ice cold and he was completely limp. He was gray. There was no sign of life. And the thing with a snake is they don't breathe the way that, well, they do breathe, but you can't see them breathing. They don't have a chest that rises and falls, so you can't tell they're breathing. They don't have eyelids, so they don't blink. So there was just literally no sign of life. I thought he was dead. And then I took the next box, and then it was Scarlet, and there's Scarlet dead, the same exact thing. I was horrified. I couldn't, just the thought, I had eight remaining snakes, so just the thought of opening each and every tank. So Joe was asleep at this point. So I went and I woke Joe up and I told him what happened. So he rushes out and he's like, we got to try to do something. So Joe has this fireplace. So we took, I thought they were all dead. Just dead. I took every snake out and he was horrified, horror-stricken. They looked in bad shape, every one of them. They were just like flopped over in my hand, ice cold, no movement. So we placed all 8 of them. I took them out of their tanks and we put them in front of the fireplace and we sat there and prayed. And all of a sudden, the first one, Vashti, she showed signs of life. Her tail moved. She moved, and then over the next couple of minutes, she got warmer and she became more alert. And then she started moving her mouth, and had this big gaping. Her mouth was gaping, and then Dakar started moving, and then Scarlet started moving, and it was like this miracle. They were coming back to life. These dead snakes. Because I'm thinking to myself, these are my pets. This is my business. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even comprehend how horrible it was. My business was gone just overnight. It was done. I had spent years raising these snakes. Each of these snakes I raised since hatchlings, since they were just a couple of grams. I had these snakes and I raised them, and just dead. My whole business wiped out, and then just the tragedy on top of this. And then they were coming back to life, and it was like this miracle. We were watching this miracle unfold. And 7 of the 8 came back, and there was the one snake, Zinga, and she didn't come back. And we were watching her and praying for her and wanting so bad for her to come back too. And she never came back. So everybody's there. The 7 of them, they're alive. And they're moving around. And Zinga, and just the scene of it, all of them sprawled out in front of the fire. And there's Zinga. And I'll tell you the thing about Zinga. She was my first big investment snake. I paid $500 for her. And she was such a sweet girl. She was my best breeder too. This was going to be her 4th year breeding for me. And I still have some of her babies for sale. I have 2 of them. I have 2 of them left. And she didn't make it. So she just didn't make it. The other ones made it. And just the guilt that I feel. And I know it wasn't my fault. It was an accident. Somebody left the garage door open. You know, I do believe I know who it was. And that's a hard thing for me to handle. I can handle that. Because it was this careless mistake, and it cost me the life of one of my snakes that I love. And that was part of my business, was the main part of my business. She was the biggest snake in my business. She was, my snakes range in price from $300 to $1,000. She was my $1,000 snakes. And it was horrible. It was just terrible. And I was talking to Joe about it last night, and he still hasn't recovered from it. It was so bad watching all these animals. You know, the thing about Joe, I know he's like this big, tough guy. But he has such a soft heart for animals. And there they were, just sprawled out, dead. It was horrible. It was so bad to see what looked like this mass death. And then he felt so bad because it happened on his watch. It wasn't his fault. He was not the one who left the garage door open. But it was this horrible thing that happened. And it was nobody's fault. It was an accident. Like I told you, it was a careless accident. But it was an accident. But I'm grateful. I am grateful. I'm beyond grateful, really, that 7 out of the 8 made it. It was a miracle. But the horror, something really bad happened. And that's what narcissism is. It's something really bad that happened, or it's happening to us. It's life altering. You aren't the same ever again. Narcissistic abuse is like that, isn't it? It's just something bad. There's no positive spin I can put on it. You know, Joe really likes horror movies. And I'm used to watching comedies with my kids, so it's been a while since I've seen a horror film. And Joe and I have watched a few lately, and it's always the same. Everything seems to start off normally. Only we, the viewer, know that there's nothing normal happening. And gradually, small things happen that are dismissed. I mean, does that sound familiar? Eventually, it's undeniable that the characters are in the presence of real evil, real danger, and they need to get away. Getting away is the rest of the movie. There's no safety, no life until that happens. Likewise with narcissism. A narcissistic entanglement begins, or we think it does anyways, like any other relationship. Poor us, though. We have no idea. Unfortunately, by the time there's no denying something is very, very wrong, we're in serious trouble. But this is no movie. This is very real, and we're very alone. I asked Joe the other day if he had any video ideas for me, and his suggestion right away is, why is it so hard to end a narcissistic relationship? And so I kind of looked at him and I started to say something, and then he said, no, really, Sharon, why? Why is it? And I told him, well, I think I know, but not everyone's going to agree. So he pressed me to tell him. And so I told him, I said, I think it's because it's spiritual warfare. It's so difficult to end a narcissistic relationship and emerge victorious and safe with no PTSD, no lingering nightmares, no side effects, because you aren't dealing with something human. You're fighting evil. A very successful man I know once said that he never acknowledges his competition. It doesn't exist. So I'm going to go against that just for a brief moment, so we'll quickly forget, all right? Why are there so many channels on YouTube about narcissism? It's because the horror and shock is outside of most people's capacities. We're searching for answers, for relief. I mean, this is how I found out about narcissism, from somebody else. I heard about it through Chris Watts, the Chris Watts case. And then I started searching YouTube and learning about it and seeing other people had experienced this too. Prior to this, I had no idea what narcissism was. I didn't know. I had no clue. I thought I was going through this all by myself. Like there was something just wrong with my relationship, something wrong with me, something wrong with my husband. I had no idea that this is an epidemic, that this is a real thing, that spiritual warfare is actually real. So why are there so many channels on YouTube about narcissism? It's because the horror and shock is outside of most people's capacities. We're searching for answers, for relief. Everybody has the capacity to be cruel or selfish. But when we're talking about narcissism, a narcissist, we're talking about dysfunction on a profound level. This is somebody that has no empathy, no conscience, no remorse, no regret. Something foreign, something that doesn't make sense. It's a nightmare. You don't get over a narcissistic relationship. You need to be saved, rescued. You know, Joe's pretty open about his past addiction issues. A few days ago, he told me that of every drug, nicotine is one of the worst to kick. And I was surprised to hear that. Really? I said. I used to smoke in my 20s heavily so I wouldn't eat. One day I quit, just like that. I was driving to the Burlington Mall in Massachusetts and I was smoking a cigarette. All of a sudden, I thought to myself, what the hell am I doing? And I tossed the cigarette out the window and was never tempted again. And so I told Joe that story and he said to me, Sharon, don't take that lightly. It's a gift from God. And I'm going to tell you something about narcissism. If you got out, don't take it lightly. It's a gift from God. If you aren't out yet, but you are aware of what's going on, hold on. You're on your way. You're doing all right. Just don't give up. When you're dealing with spiritual warfare, God determines how long it will last, not we. There are some people who held on, and then when there was one day left, they gave up. They didn't know they only had one more day Never give up. There's no precedent in the Bible for giving up. Bringing this full circle, just like I told you at the beginning of the video, there's nothing good about what happened to my snakes. Poor Zynga, my business. But I can't. I won't let tragedy define me. Please, please don't let tragedy define you. It wasn't my fault what happened to my snakes. I told you somebody else left the garage door open. And, I do know it was an accident, but like I said, I'm going to have to deal with that because I know who it was and it cost my snake its life. I need to deal with that. Just like we all need to deal with what happened to us, because ultimately it's what we do afterwards that defines us. We can't be ruined people, victims, fearful of our own shadows. And I get that. And it's okay to hunker down for a bit. But don't make your fear, your pain, a lifestyle. You won the war. Go out, live life, love again, trust, laugh. Not everyone survives it. We did. So take that prize and go with it. Once God frees you, nothing can stop you but you. Thank you so much for watching this video. And I'm sorry I was emotional at the beginning. I knew I was going to be, but I just felt like it was so important to understand that when something bad happens, it's what you do afterwards that matters. We can mourn and we can feel sad and bad about the whole thing, but we can't let it take over our entire life. We have a life to live. We have children to raise. We have fun to still have. We have life inside of us. Don't let the narcissist take that. I really look at it when it comes to my ex. There is no way in hell over my dead body is he going to take away my future. He took 20 years from me. I can never get that back. But I still have a future ahead of me. I don't know how long I have. Maybe I'm going to get hit by a truck tomorrow. Maybe I'm going to live to be 100 years old. I don't know. But whatever time I have left, I want to spend it enjoying my family, living life, and being grateful that I have this second chance. I hope everybody has a wonderful day. I will see you on Monday, hopefully with Joe. Like I mentioned yesterday on the community page, he's been really sick lately. So hopefully he is better so we can do a video over the weekend. And I will be back next week to my regular Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. So God bless everybody. Thank you again. And I will see you on Monday.